My name is Claire Ellison. I am 41 years old, and I'm holding a brass house key right now, tarnished along the teeth, warm from sitting in my palm for the last 20 minutes, with a strip of faded blue painter's tape still wrapped around the bow, where someone wrote beach in my mother's handwriting, because this key was supposed to mean I belonged. It was handed to me when I was 19. And 3 Saturdays ago, my brother used what it opened to tell my daughter she wasn't welcome inside. The key weighs almost nothing, less than a quarter. But when I turned it over under the kitchen light that night, after we drove the 4 hours home, I noticed something I hadn't seen in over 2 decades of carrying it. The bitting, those are the ridges, the cuts along the blade that correspond to the pins inside the lock, had been filed down on the third and fifth positions. Not broken, filed, smoothly, deliberately, with something fine-toothed. The kind of alteration that would let the key slide into the cylinder but fail to turn. I held it between my thumb and forefinger, and I didn't move for a long time. I was already running through the dates. I was already counting backwards to the last time this key had actually worked. Before I tell you what I did the night I decided to test it, where are you right now? Drop it in the comments, because I remember exactly where I was standing when I realized this key hadn't opened anything in years, and that the lock wasn't the only thing that had been changed. I should tell you what I do for a living. I'm a locksmith. Not the kind you call when you're standing outside your apartment at 2 in the morning. I'm a forensic locksmith. I examine locks, keys, and access control systems for insurance claims, criminal investigations, and civil disputes. When a business says their vault was breached, I can tell you whether the lock was picked, bumped, bypassed, or opened by someone who already had the combination. When an estate dispute hinges on who had physical access to a property, I examine the hardware. I read wear patterns on pin tumblers the way a dentist reads x-rays. I can tell you how many times a lock has been rekeys, when the last service was performed, and whether the key in your hand was ever intended to operate the mechanism it claims to fit. That skill had exposed fraudulent break-in claims for 16 years and exposed altered access records in 3 federal investigations. It was about to expose my own family. My mother bought the beach house in Topsail Island, North Carolina, in 1994. She was a high school music teacher who saved for 11 years, renting the same studio apartment until she could put 20% down on a 3-bedroom cottage 4 blocks from the shore. She made 2 copies of the front door key the week she closed. One went to me. One went to my brother Graham. The blue tape, my mother's handwriting. She told us both the same thing. This house belongs to our family, which means it belongs to both of you equally, and anyone you love is welcome here without asking. My mother died in 2011, ovarian cancer. She was 58. There was no formal will regarding the beach house. My mother had a handwritten letter, notarized, witnessed by her neighbor, stating the house was to remain in shared family ownership, used equally by both her children and their families, with neither party permitted to sell without the other's written consent. Graham got a copy. I got a copy. Our mother's attorney kept the original. Graham is 3 years older than me. He's a commercial real estate broker in Raleigh, married to Val, and they have 2 sons, Aiden and Jackson. Graham has always treated the beach house like his, not aggressively, not in ways you could point to in front of other people. He'd book the 4th of July week without asking. He'd leave his boys' surfboards in the storage closet year-round, so there was no room for anything else. He'd refer to it in conversation as my place at the beach, dropping the R. Val would post photos on social media captioning them, our family's beach house, with only their family in the frame. I let it go, every time. Because my mother asked us to share, and I interpreted sharing as not keeping score. My daughter Iris is 7. I adopted her from foster care when she was 3. She is the best thing that has ever happened to me, and she is also, in Graham's careful phrasing over the years, not a blood relative. He has never said this directly to Iris. He says it to Val, to his friends, and occasionally to me in private, as if reminding me of a technicality I might have forgotten. 3 Saturdays ago, I drove 4 hours from our apartment in Durham to spend the weekend at the beach house. I had texted Graham on Monday. He had responded, and I scrolled back to confirm the exact words. Should be fine. We're heading down Friday, but there's room. Iris was in the back seat with her inflatable flamingo and a sandwich bag of goldfish crackers. When we pulled into the gravel driveway at 3:15, Graham was on the front porch with Aiden, both of them in swim trunks, a cooler between their chairs. I unbuckled Iris. She ran toward the porch holding the flamingo over her head. Graham stood up. "Hey, Claire." He looked past me to Iris, then back. "We didn't set up for her. The boys have friends coming. There's really not space this weekend." I stood on the gravel holding the car keys in one hand and the brass house key in the other. The teeth of the house key pressed into my palm. I didn't move. I didn't answer. Iris had stopped 3 steps from the porch, flamingo still raised, looking at Graham the way children look at closed doors they expected to be opened. "Come on," Graham said. "It's just this once. You can come back next month," I said. "Fine." I loaded Iris back into the car. She didn't cry. She asked me if Graham's house had too many people inside. I told her sometimes plans change. We drove to a motel in Surf City, $79 a night, and they charged $12 for the rollaway cot. Iris fell asleep holding the deflated flamingo she never got to use. I sat on the edge of the motel bed at 11:40 that night and took out the brass key. I turned it under the bedside lamp the way I turn evidence in my lab, slowly, under controlled light, looking for what doesn't belong. That's when I saw the filed bidding, positions 3 and 5, reduced by approximately 15 thousandths of an inch each, enough to prevent the key from operating the lock, not enough to notice by holding it casually. You'd have to know what you were looking at. I snorted quietly in that motel room, loud enough that Iris shifted in her sleep. The irony was that I had spent my entire career determining whether someone had been locked out on purpose or by accident. I'd written expert reports on exactly this kind of alteration. I'd once testified for 2 hours about the difference between wear pattern degradation and intentional modification. And for 22 years, I had carried this key in my purse like a talisman, without once examining it with the eyes I used on everything else. The next morning, I drove to the beach house at 7:15. Graham and Val were still asleep. Their Suburban was in the driveway, curtains drawn. I walked to the front door and inserted the key. It slid in. It did not turn. I applied moderate rotational pressure, the kind that would operate a functioning key. Nothing. I withdrew the key and photographed the cylinder face with my phone, using the macro lens attachment I keep in my work bag. The cylinder was a Schlag B60N, not the original quickset deadbolt my mother had installed. The lock had been replaced. I drove to the Lowe's in Hampstead and bought the same model. In the parking lot, I disassembled it and examined the factory pin stack. Then I returned to the beach house, Graham still asleep, and photographed the exterior screws on the installed deadbolt. The screw heads showed tool marks consistent with a Phillips head driver and recent installation, no oxidation, no paint overlap from the last time the door frame had been painted, which according to the maintenance receipts my mother kept in a filing cabinet in Durham, was August 2018. That was layer 1. Graham had changed the lock. My key was decorative. Layer 2 took 3 phone calls. The first was to Coastal Key and Lock in Sneed's Ferry, the only locksmith within 15 miles of the beach house. I identified myself, gave my license number, and asked whether they had a service record for the property address. They did. The lock had been rekeyed on March 14, 2019, 8 months after our mother's house was last painted. The work order was signed by Graham Ellison. 2 keys were cut. The customer noted. Owner, sole occupant. I called the Onslow County Tax Assessor's office next. Property records showed the beach house, titled jointly, Claire Ellison and Graham Ellison, consistent with our mother's notarized letter. But the mailing address for tax correspondence had been changed in January 2019 to Graham's home address in Raleigh. My name remained on the title. My address had been removed from all correspondence. I then called the homeowner's insurance carrier listed on the policy my mother had set up. The agent confirmed the policy had been updated in February 2019. Graham was listed as the sole insured. My name had been removed. The agent read me the note attached to the file change. Per owner request, co-owner no longer residing at property. I stared at the paperwork I was printing at the motel's business center. Something in me went completely still. Not angry, not sad, still. I was reading the modification dates, the way I read evidence timelines in my lab, looking for the sequence, the intent, the preparation. March 2019, the lock. January 2019, the tax records. February 2019, the insurance. He had started removing me in January. The lock was the last step. The key in my purse was the punctuation mark, not broken, not taken back, left in my possession so I would never think to check. Layer 3. I called our mother's attorney, Helen Garza, retired but reachable. She confirmed she held the original notarized letter. She also told me something I hadn't known. In October 2018, Graham had contacted her office, requesting a copy of the letter. Her paralegal had sent it. 3 months later, he began the removal process. Helen said one more thing. In 2015, Graham had contacted her asking whether the notarized letter constituted a legally binding instrument or a statement of wishes. Helen had told him it carried legal weight. He had not contacted her again until 2018 when he requested the copy. He had been planning this for years. Testing whether the letter could be challenged, requesting a copy so he knew exactly what he needed to work around, then systematically removing my name from every record connected to the property while leaving the title intact, because changing the title would have required my signature. Layer 4 arrived in my inbox the following Tuesday morning. I had submitted a FOIA request to the county for all permit activity on the property. Graham had pulled a renovation permit in June 2020 for a $47,000 kitchen remodel and a $23,000 bathroom addition. The contractor listed was Blue Tide Renovations, a company whose registered agent, I discovered through the Secretary of State's business entity search, was Valerie Ellison, Graham's wife. They had hired Val's own company to renovate a jointly owned property, using funds drawn from a home equity line of credit opened against the house, a HELOC that required both owners' signatures. I requested a copy of the HELOC application from the lender. The co-borrower signature line bore my name. The handwriting was not mine. The slant was wrong. My natural writing leans 11 degrees left of vertical, a measurement I can verify against 20 years of my own signed documents. This signature leaned 6 degrees right. And my middle initial was missing. They had forged my signature to borrow $70,000 against our mother's house, then paid the money to themselves. The key sat on the motel nightstand the whole time I was assembling this. Iris would pick it up sometimes, run her thumb along the teeth, and set it down. She didn't know what it meant. She just liked holding something that looked old and important. I waited 5 weeks. I did not confront Graham by phone. I did not confront him at his office. I waited for the annual Ellison family gathering, the one Graham hosts every August at the beach house. The house he had stolen half of and renovated with forged money, and then used to exclude my daughter from the only place our mother had ever asked us to share. There were 14 people on the back deck when I arrived. Graham's business partners, Val's family, their boys, 2 neighbors. Graham had set up a buffet table and hung string lights between the porch posts. He'd mounted a framed photo of our mother near the back door, the one where she's holding both our keys, smiling. The monument was complete. He saw me cross the yard and his expression shifted for half a second before resetting. "Claire, we weren't expecting you this weekend." "I know," I said. I placed a manila folder on the buffet table next to the coleslaw. "This is a copy of the Schlag B60N work order from Coastal Key and Lock, dated March 2019. Your signature." Graham glanced at it. "I had maintenance done. That's normal upkeep." I placed a second document. "This is the homeowner's insurance policy update. February 2019. My name removed. Note says per owner request." Val stepped forward from the kitchen doorway. "Claire, this isn't the time or the place." I placed a third document. HELOC application, $70,000 against this property. Co-borrower signature line. That is not my handwriting. Graham's jaw tightened. "You're being dramatic. You always do this." "After everything I've done for this family," Val said, her voice climbing, "after every holiday I've hosted here, every meal I've cooked in that kitchen, you're going to come here with paperwork and embarrass us?" "She's always been like this," Graham said to his business partner David, who was standing near the grill holding a spatula and looking like he wanted to be in a different state. "She's been angry since Mom died." She had a hard time with the adoption. She's not thinking clearly. I waited. I did not respond to any of it. I placed the fourth document, the county permit for the renovation, Blue Tide Renovations, registered agent Valerie Ellison, $70,000 paid to the contractor who shared a bed with the borrower who forged the co-owner's signature. David set down the spatula. He looked at the permit, then at Graham. Graham, is this right? Val's company did the renovation. It's a family business, Graham said. There's nothing wrong with that. On a jointly owned property, David said quietly, with a forged signature on the lending instrument. Graham, I'm your escrow attorney. You should have told me. David had been Graham's closing attorney on 6 commercial deals. Graham had invited him to the party. Graham had not expected him to read the documents. David looked at the HELOC application, then at me. Is this your signature? No, I said. My natural slant is left of vertical. This leans right. My middle initial is R. It's absent. David exhaled through his nose and set the document down like it was contaminated. I looked at Graham, 14 people on the deck, string lights buzzing softly, our mother's photo watching from beside the back door. I said one sentence. You didn't want to share the house. You wanted to erase the person you were supposed to share it with. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I picked up my folder. Iris was sitting in the car with my neighbor Linda, who had driven down separately at my request. I had not brought Iris onto the property. I had not let her see any of this. She did not need to witness her uncle's face when the truth arrived. She needed a mother who handled it and came back whole. The consequences arrived the way gravity does, not all at once, but in the direction everything had already been falling. The lender opened a fraud investigation within 9 days of receiving my affidavit and the forensic handwriting comparison I prepared. Graham's name was flagged. The HELOC was frozen. Repayment of the outstanding balance, $61,400, was demanded in full within 90 days. Val's contractor license came under review by the North Carolina Licensing Board after I filed a complaint documenting that Blue Tide Renovations had performed permitted work on a property where the contract was secured through a forged instrument. The review suspended her ability to pull permits in 3 counties. David withdrew as Graham's escrow attorney. He sent a letter, professional, brief, final. Within 2 weeks, 2 of Graham's commercial clients requested new representation. His brokerage firm launched an internal review of all transactions David had facilitated on Graham's behalf. Val's sister, Michelle, had been standing on the deck that night, holding a glass of white wine, saying nothing. Michelle had known about the lock change. She had told me a year earlier, casually, that Graham had updated the security at the beach house. I had not understood then what she meant. After the gathering, Michelle didn't call for 3 weeks. When she did, her voice was different, smaller. She said she had watched Val practice my signature on a legal pad in their kitchen in late 2019. She had told herself it was something to do with estate paperwork. She hadn't asked. She told me she was sorry, and that she understood if I couldn't accept that. I told her I heard her. I did not tell her it was okay, because it wasn't. She had watched, and she had stayed quiet, and she was telling me now because the truth had already arrived without her help. Her apology was real. It was also late. Those 2 things would have to live next to each other for a while. Graham and Val separated in November, not because of me. Because the financial exposure cracked something between them that had apparently been fracturing for years. Val moved to her mother's house in Greenville. Graham listed his Raleigh home. The beach house remains jointly titled. Graham no longer has a functioning key. I filed a partition action in Onslow County to force a formal resolution, either a buyout at fair market value or a supervised sale with equitable division. The court appointed an independent appraiser. The house was valued at $410,000, up from the $87,000 my mother had paid in 1994. The kitchen and bathroom that Val's company had built with forged money increased the value by approximately $55,000. The court noted this in its preliminary findings. 2 months ago, I took Iris to Topsail Island for a weekend, not to the beach house. To the same motel in Surf City where we'd stayed the night Graham turned her away. Same room, actually, I requested it. Iris didn't remember. She was already running for the pool with her flamingo. I sat on the motel bed and took out the brass key. I've kept it. I had a display case made, small, walnut, glass-topped, the kind I use for evidence preservation in my lab. I set the key inside it. The blue tape still legible, my mother's handwriting still clear. Beach. I closed the lid and set it on the nightstand. Iris came in later, sandy and sunburned, and saw it. What's that? It's a key your grandmother gave me. Does it open something? It used to. She pressed her fingers against the glass and looked at it for a long time. The way children study things they know are important, even when no one has explained why. Then she went to brush her teeth. I sat there holding the case. The key that couldn't open anything had become the thing that opened everything. Not because of what it was designed to do, because of what someone had done to it, and because I finally looked at it the way I look at every other piece of evidence that comes across my bench. With the training I'd spent a career sharpening, with the willingness to see what the alteration actually meant, instead of what I wished it meant. There is a difference between a door being locked and a door being locked against you. The first is security, the second is a message. And when someone files down the teeth of your key instead of asking for it back, they are not protecting the house, they are protecting the lie that you were never excluded, that you simply stopped coming. The quiet version, the deniable version. The version that lets them hang your mother's photo by the back door and stand beneath it at parties without flinching. I think about the people who repeat that version, the ones who said Graham takes such good care of the property, and never asked why I wasn't there. Silence in a family operates exactly like silence in a compromised lock. It doesn't announce itself. It just means the mechanism no longer works, and everyone agrees not to test it. Is there something sitting in your drawer right now? A key? A card? A document? A letter? That you've been carrying as proof you belong somewhere, without ever checking whether it still works? And if you held it up to the light tonight, with the eyes you use on everything else in your life, what would you actually see? This story is a fictional narrative created for entertainment, education, and dramatic reflection. We hope it reminded you that your dignity is not negotiable, and that setting a boundary, even a painful one, can be an act of love for yourself and everyone the pattern would have reached next.